All right, folks, live here right outside of the Capitol, as we normally do, doing a kind of an ad hoc, small little, whatever you want to call it, press conference. And it's in the run up to the 10 o'clock, 10 a.m., the Judiciary Committee. One of the subcommittees is going to host, I shouldn't say host, but is going to question the director of the board of the Bureau of Prisons. And the chair of that subcommittee is Congressman Andy Biggs. Some of the other key notable members of Congress that may actually have a spine to ask and uncover some of the lawless behavior by the Bureau of Prisons director, Colette Peters, are Congressman Tom Tiffany from Wisconsin, Congressman Matt Gaetz from Florida, and a few others. But those are definitely the top three there. Now, with that, I wanted to really highlight three particular inmates throughout the country, and this doesn't mean that all the other inmates that where their First Amendment is being violated, due process is being violated, and basically all policies and procedures within not only the Department of Justice, the Bureau of Prisons, but probably the actual prison itself, they're being violated because the DOJ is still being used to weaponize against those political opponents that are in the best position to expose the corruption of the very DOJ that has weaponized themselves against them. So, three individuals I'd like to highlight are John Strand, who's being held in political captivity at FCI Miami. Also, uh, Owen Schroyer, a journalist who's being held in captivity as a political hostage at FCI Oakdale, which is in Congressman, Speaker of the House now, Mike Johnson's district. And by the way, FCI Miami is in Maria Elvira Salazar's district, Congresswoman. And then the third one is Joe Biggs. And I'm going to touch real quick upon John Strand. It appears as though I'm hearing that Congressman Matt Gaetz is all over that particular issue. He's been communicating with one of the representatives of John Strand, Dr. Simone Gold, and he will be grilling the director, hopefully, on uncovering the cruel and unusual and inhumane treatment of, just face it, John Strand was over here in the Capitol providing security for Dr. Gold, and he did not assault anybody. He did not do any damage to anything. It was completely peaceful. It was a simple maximum. It was a simple trespass. But yet, this government, the lawless and illegitimate executive branch, as I call it, continues to act as though they're attempting to act like a tyrannical dictatorship. And luckily, we have some folks, myself and others, that are pushing back. The other person that's pushing back massively in the court, in the actual courts, not only in the court of public opinion, is esteemed attorney here in the District of Columbia, Norm Pattis. You should have been in the frame the whole time, but Norm Pattis is going to give us a little update and what he hopes to see in this hearing as it relates to Owen Schroyer, who he represents, as well as Joe Biggs.
Yeah, so there are serious questions about just what's going on right now in the United States. I'd call it a legitimation crisis. People look at government and feel it's not part of their lives. It doesn't represent their values, doesn't represent their interests. And the First Amendment, which is one of the fundamental laws of the land, people like to say it's first for a reason, guarantees to each and every person in the United States the right to petition for redress of grievances. That is to say, I don't like this and I want you to do something about it. To peacefully assemble and to speak out about matters of public concern or even private concern, so long as they don't violate the law. The government has taken a view of the First Amendment right now that should chill each and every one of you, where you sit, where you sleep, where you live, because what you think is under attack. Let me talk first about the Owen Schroyer case. Owen Schroyer, as many of you know, works with Alex Jones on InfoWars. He's an afternoon host. He does something called the War Room. He's opinionated. He's outspoken. Love him or hate him, I support his right to say what he wants, when he wants, at the time he says it. And if there are legal consequences, that's what courts are for. It's not for Congress, it's not for the Department of Justice to put their thumb on the scale. Owen was present in the Capitol on January 6th, but in the weeks and months beforehand, he spoke out on InfoWars. He spoke out and said, stop the steal. He spoke out and said the Chinese communists are trying to stage a silent coup. He spoke out and said, we the people are losing control of institutions that define our lives. And he said, I'm angry about it. I'm angry about it, and I'm going to go to Washington to protest. You should join me. People attended protests in November and December, and they attended the mother of all protests on January 6th. On January 6th,
I actually call it the election justice or election integrity rally.
All right, election integrity rally.
Attended by almost all of them were peaceful and patriotic First Amendment rally attendees.
Almost all of them were, but a riot did take place that day, and Owen stood together on the steps of the Capitol with others and urged people not to go into the Capitol. He stood there and said, don't give the left what it wants. Don't create talking points.
Right, it's on video. It's clear. He was diffusing the situation.
The government prosecuted him anyhow, and they prosecuted him for effectively trespass. And he did trespass, and he acknowledged that. He didn't do so with criminal intent. He didn't do so with malice. He did not do so in violation of any prior court orders, whatever the legacy media tells you. He earlier had protested at an impeachment hearing in the House committee conducted by Representative Nadler. He was ousted. He was prosecuted. He was told to do some community service. The government lied in its sentencing memo later in the case and said he hadn't done the hours. They did. Even Judge Kelly acknowledged that. But here's what happened in the Owen Schroyer case. When you're sentenced in federal court, a professional, a pretrial services officer, does what's called a pre-sentence investigation. They're the professionals. They know what the penal system's all about. They know the criminal code. They know the standards. They recommended to the judge that Owen be given probation. The Justice Department said, no, we want him in prison. And why? Because, and this is quotes, these are quotes from the government sentencing memo. I'll never forget them as long as I live. Owen engaged in disinformation. He encouraged people to attend Stop the Steal rally. He came to other rallies. He chanted 1776. He challenged death to tyrants, as though any of these things were prohibited or suspect as a matter of law. The government asked the court to consider that as quote-unquote relevant offense conduct. We said absolutely not. People have a right, maintain the right to protest and to engage in all the other First Amendment rights we discussed.
It turns out that all the information that I think I read through there has resulted in, especially with this new House of Representatives, it's all been factually proven to be true. Whether it's Twitter files, so the disinformation definition is now changed to any content that is in contravention to the illegitimate executive branch's edicts.
If we don't like your ideas,
exercised through its Department of Justice. Then they manipulate and coerce the courts into believing it.
Owen spoke out, and Judge Kelly sentenced him to 60 days at Oakdale. We have an appeal pending in the United States District Court for the District of Columbia. Good. Allowed to take it all the way over there across the street to the Supreme Court, and we will.
Right over there.
Today they're arguing a Second Amendment case. Sometime soon they'll be arguing Owens. In any case, he goes to Oakdale, a prison in Mike Johnson's district in Louisiana, and he initially is set in isolation, as they do all prisoners, as a COVID protocol. May not like it, but that's their right. He's released. The day he's released, he uses the phone to contact me and to contact his colleagues. And in the contact with his colleagues, which was recorded, he talked about his gratitude for his supporters, his hopes for the nation, his desire to be back on the air soon. And he said he might try to do something that he did, as far as he knew, had never been done before. He might try a live broadcast from the prison. Within hours, he was placed back in solitary confinement. For what? For a phone call?
For their definition of disinformation, meaning truthful content that exposes their lawlessness and corruption.
Maybe, I don't know, because I've written to them and asked for an explanation. They've acknowledged my contact and said, we'll get back to you when we have somebody with more information. To date, they haven't. I've not heard from Owen. Yesterday, someone posted that they had received a tip from someone, I don't know where, that Owen was going to be held in solitary for another 30 days. He'd been moved to a new building. Don't know if that's true. We're trying to reach out to get to Owen. We're trying to avoid going to court. Today, I'm here to hope to talk to a couple congressmen privately, if possible, about Owen's case and to ask them to ask the DOJ, what in the hell is going on here? Because here's why. There's an even bigger story that hasn't been reported yet, and this relates to the sentencing of Joe Biggs and other members of the Proud Boys. Prior to their being sent to prison, the Bureau of Prisons did a scoring. It looked at what their risk factors were and determined, I'm told, that these individuals should go to a low security camp. They were no threat to national security. I'm told that the District of Columbia's district attorney's office put their thumb on the scales and said, no, we want them in a penitentiary. We want harsher conditions of confinement. I'm told that this was
U.S.
done,
attorney or D.C. district?
The D.C. district attorneys. I'm told that the thumbprint of the head of the office is on that. I want congressmen to call Matthew Graves of the district attorney's prosecutor's office before them and ask whether the same DOJ that prosecuted these guys and looked for way too much time. We joke in my office that Judge Timothy J. Kelly is halfway Kelly. He has a tendency to give the government half of what they wanted. They wanted 34 years for Joe Biggs. Probation said 10 years would have done it. He gave 17 or 32 years, I think, for Biggs. We're told that the same Justice Department that did that, the same Justice Department that tried to classify and succeeded in getting them classified as terrorists for destroying a $32,000 fence. That's what that was all about. We're concerned that that same Justice Department, which has supervisory power over the Bureau of Prisons, that same Justice Department, we think, has its thumb on the scales of justice. We don't think that's fair. They prosecuted, they were zealous advocates, they got a lot of what they wanted, but not all. It should go out of their hands now because it looks to us like spite imprisonment. Joe Biggs was being held. He was recently moved to a southern prison. His hands were cuffed in box cuffs used against industry standards for the use of those. He lost circulation in his hands. He doesn't have regular contact with his families. Another one of the Proud Boys has been banned or barred from use of a library. Is information power? Will what you read set you free? Listen, people, I'm telling you straight up, there is a battle going on for the soul of America, for the hearts and minds of Americans. And if you value freedom of speech, you gotta stand behind Joe Biggs. You gotta stand behind the others who are being prosecuted, and groups like Condemned USA, which has stood by to raise funds for these guys to help support them, their families, and yes, their counsel. If you value the fight, get in the fight, because the cell that Owen Schroyer is in today is being warmed up. Is it being warmed up for you?
Thank you, Norm. Last question. As we walk into the Rayburn building to sit in that hearing, what is your ideal outcome of the hearing?
Hard questions and a BOP that goes back and says Congress is watching. And hopefully notice of another hearing where Matthew Graves is called in to ask her questions about who is pulling the levers of power in the BOP, and are these men being treated as political prisoners rather than as mere prisoners?
And I know that was the last, I guess it was the penultimate. What would be your statement to the new Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, and the Chair of the Judiciary, as well as the subcommittee chair, Andy Biggs, if you had him in the room with you?
Congressional oversight is significant, never more so than when prosecutors use their unreviewed discretion to bring charges, to ask for sentences, and to affect how people are incarcerated. These are political prosecutions. A close look needs to be taken, and the Justice Department, for all its rhetoric at trial about being held accountable, needs to be held accountable because there are political crimes taking place under your watch, Congressman. What are you going to do about it?
Let's go do Citizens Overwatch and representing your client, and I'll continue to deep state maraud. Thanks. And if you want to know what type of questions might be asked at that hearing, go ahead and read my Substack, because I sent those out to several members of that committee.